Hey everyone, good afternoon. Thank you for sticking with us throughout the programs today. I hope all of you have been just absorbing the kind of wellspring of knowledge that's there from our customers. I was talking to Ed right before this call, and I said, it's moments like these when we have events like these where we just come to really, really appreciate our customers. We really do have the best customers out there, and just a massive amount of knowledge that they all have is just so phenomenal. So again, thank you for joining us. So in this current session, we are joined by Ed Berry of Island.io. And we're going to be talking about scaling. What does smart scaling look like? And basically, how did Island.io come to build a cloud go-to-market motion that worked for them? Before I throw it over to Ed to introduce you, I have to share this kind of really fast story. I was on a call last week with another customer, and we were just kind of small talking before we dove into whatever it was that we were going to talk about. And he said, I'm actually building out a webinar that I'm hosting next week. And I said, actually, funny story, so am I. And we were just kind of small talking about those sessions. And when I got to talking about mine, I said, I get to host with this really cool gentleman by the name of Ed Berry. And he literally stopped me and said, wait, the Ed Berry?
Okay.
And it's the one and only Ed Berry, let's be honest.
Jeez.
And he goes, that guy is literally like a founder of this whole motion. And I was like, he's a pretty cool guy. That's why he's tackle. So, Ed, I'll pass it over to you for the few who don't know you.
Oh, geez, David, thank you. What an intro. I don't think I can live up to that. But hey, everybody, my name is Ed Berry. I've been fortunate to meet with and work with many of you that are on the phone. It's a pleasure, or on the call. It's great to see everybody again. So as David mentioned, I'm the VP of Cloud here at Island. Island, you may know, is the leader and creator of the enterprise browser. And if you haven't been following a little bit about that space, you're soon going to be. It's absolutely revolutionized the market. I mean, we have 8 of the top 10 banks. We've got the majority of the Fortune 50, and it's just been a tremendous success for Island. I've been really excited to work with Tackle again, because I think I've had prior engagements. I think this might be my 4th one. And prior to Island, I was with some of you perhaps at McAfee, at SailPoint, at Armis, among others. So I was just super compelled to come here to Island, because if you take a look at the vision that Island has, and the types of technology that we're releasing, the disruption that we've got, and the innovation in the market, it just made so much sense for me to try to marry some of that innovation with the innovation taking place on the go-to-market side, which Tackle has been leading now with the hyperscalers for some time. So it's early days, but I'm really excited to be here with you, and thanks for having me, David.
Absolutely. So Ed, as we dive right in and we're talking about the ideas of scaling and what that looks like when building out a GTM motion, obviously we hear a lot about starting smart, not big. We hear the analogy all the time of the crawl, walk, run. How did you and Island decide to approach working with the hyperscalers? What did that look like, and kind of where did it go from that starting point that you all had?
Yeah. Thank you. So, we've been at this now for 2 years. I joined Island 2 years ago. And I want to reference back to something that John Yankee said earlier in the week. I think it was yesterday. He talked about some statistics that if you heard them for the first time, or even if you didn't, they're pretty eye-popping. So the first thing he said was that Gartner forecasted that there's about 1.2 trillion with a T dollars being sold, software dollars being sold in 2025. And the marketplace commitments, if you will, so the buying commitments that end users have made to the big 3 in the United States amount to about $440 billion of that. So still a massive number, but what this tells me, and it tells everybody else, is that we're only 3 to 4% adopted or penetrated from this go-to-market motion. And so the first message I want everybody to hear is that it's not too late to get in. If you've been hearing about this, you've been learning about this, it's finally time to jump in. Welcome. There's plenty of room, and there's plenty of market for us to go and pursue. And so, I think in part that gives us some wind at our back. Now, the issue is a lot of us have been at this for some time, right? And so, one of the things that I'll say, when you talk about starting, is you got to start with the program. And so you need to join the programs, if anything, to set the foundation, not just for your transactions, but, for the types of relationships that you're going to have with these companies. And I think, the three hyperscalers have done at least the ones I've worked with have done a great job of teeing up their programs, and they're somewhat similar and yet somewhat separate. But the first thing is, yeah, just get on the programs, because without that, you won't really have a go-to-market motion. But then, don't go it alone. Like when you're deciding which one you want to lean in with, there's a whole team at Tackle that can help you talk through not just that. And I started with Tackle when they were doing listings, and they're now helping our business a lot further along. But Tackle can also coach you in terms of like when some of these vendors have subsidies that you may want to take advantage of. They certainly did that with us. So they've got a really, really good pulse on like which avenue you may want to go from an ops standpoint. Now, then the next step is once you figure out the programmatic things and you do some socialization with your ops team, we'll get to that in a second. Then the question becomes, what is your pitch? What is your better together with the hyperscalers? And that'll be something that we'll cover later on today. But again, it's an early days, it's a massive market. You have friends in the industry if you are working with Tackle and some of the others in the industry, and it's a well-worn path, so you can get on the train. Now the question is how to differentiate yourself.
That brings up a really interesting point. I consider myself really lucky to be able to work with a lot of ISVs who are just getting started. They're either brand new and they're just getting listed, or they've been in the market for a couple of years, and this is the year that they're pedal to the metal, they're ready to roll. And a theme that I tend to see is everyone wants to do everything everywhere all at once. We kind of skip the walking section and just, we start sprinting essentially. What were some of those kind of early traps that your teams were able to avoid? Obviously, again, with that being said, of the idea of everyone wants to do everything all at once, what were some of those traps that were early there for you all?
Right. And I mean, for some of us, it's a great question, David. And for some of us who are on the phone, some of us are still persuading and socializing internally to our companies, whether they even want to do this, whether this is a bona fide, fully fledged go-to-market motion that they want to implement. And so, the work not only is to persuade the hyperscalers to work with us, but also to persuade sometimes our internal stakeholders, which may not be 100% aligned because, again, this is so new, right? So, what I would say to that one is this, that the program can take you only so far. Like they're really well thought out. They put the right gates up so that the right types of partners, and when I say the right types, what I mean is those that are adding value, those that may be driving consumption, those that are driving big deals, like all of the right sensible gates are in place so that the ones that are most relevant are going to bubble up to the top. But as alliance leaders, we're not off the hook on just doing the programmatic stuff. It's in fact looking left and right. Every time you have a conversation with somebody at AWS, you're selling yourself. And more importantly, you're asking them what their biggest problems are. So if you're putting things into ACE as an example, and you get married up with a, with a seller, the temptation will be to tell them all that you do. And you know what? You should be doing some of that, but it's also a great opportunity to ask them what they're seeing and to morph your value proposition. And indeed, that's what we did. We started working primarily more on the enterprise side of the house and found that our value propositions were great, but they were not hitting the mark when it came to what an AWS seller happened to be looking for at that time. By listening to where the sellers are themselves and understanding their priorities, you can then morph into what they need and have a much better result.
I love that you mentioned, and you already started to talk about it, like the idea of verticals. And this is something that, you and I have talked about a lot in the past. How was Island actually able to tailor its value proposition for specific verticals?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really fortunate here because our vertical sales leaders, they are industry leaders that have led vertical teams at other organizations. CrowdStrike comes to mind. So our vertical leader here, John Kirkman, was at CrowdStrike, and so he's quite familiar with how to work with the hyperscalers. But I'll say that, the important thing was to identify within our verticals which value propositions do we have that might tailor to the vertical at a hyperscaler. So just because you've got pursuing, say, life sciences or pursuing government, you need to get the value proposition that you have in there aligned with the value proposition that the AWS seller wants. And so necessarily you have to have all the people kind of working with each other. That made the difference for us, is getting our vertical team leaders together to speak with one another about the problems they were facing, and then zeroing in on the types of solutions we could bring to solve those problems.
It's interesting you share that. I was working with an ISV a couple months back, and they had been in the marketplace for a while, and it's the example of, okay, we now are seeing so much go on around us. We need to get in on this, this whole thing, this marketplace. And they made a comment, we offer products, say A, B, and C, and these are all verticals like focused in each one. And they really wanted to focus in on B. They said, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We realize that, like, there's a lot of competition right now, and they focused everything on that vertical B. I mean, their co-selling motion, their sellers motions, and watching them find success in that has been so amazing, because it's only been a couple of months that they started this and really focused in on this kind of niche area of the market. It's been really, really exciting and gratifying to actually see this work out with them.
Yeah, and look at it from like the hyperscaler's point of view. So if you're an Azure seller right now, you're getting what, 100 of these leads a week? Like, that's a real number that I've heard. And so not only do you need to learn your own products, not only do you need to learn your own comp plan, which can be pretty difficult to do as a seller at one of these organizations, not only do you have to be competent enough to know what to spot for your own products, let alone bring in your product specialists. On top of that, you're going to need to learn enough about your partners' products, the ones that we're pitching to them. And so it's got to be relevant to what they're selling every day, or it's just going to be another thing that's going to be lost in the noise. Now, the other thing, it brings us kind of right back to full circle on the programmatic stuff. Absolutely essential, because if you're not part of that program, then they won't even look at you because they won't get paid on you. And so, we're all coin operated. So you're really seeing kind of the fusion between, in my opinion, the program side of this and then kind of the direct sales side of it coming together. And that's what's going to give you your, really your strongest field play.
Yeah. As we're talking about these verticals, it's one thing to say, let's go vertical. But it's another thing to actually pick the right one. What were the signs with Island that you all had actually picked the right vertical and that you were ready for deeper investment?
Yeah. Well, the good news for us is, we have these established verticals already. So I think it's an excellent question, but it may not be exactly hitting the mark with all of the sellers or all of the Alliance people and others that are on the call today saying, well, what if I don't have a vertical? And so, or what if I don't have a vertical sales team per se? And so what I would probably do in that case is I would take a look at my pipeline, and I would look at segmenting what verticals we are currently selling into in the absence of having a vertical sales force. And then what I would do is I would use like the tackle propensity to buy report, or I think what you guys call it, tackle prospect. I'd get into tackle prospect and I'd look at all of those opportunities that are currently forecast in some vertical. And then I would sit down with sales management and say, would you like assistance to try to close some of these opportunities? Can we get you involved with one of the hyperscalers? Are you looking for things like budget? Are you looking for things like contracts? But then, even beyond that, some sellers that I've spoken to actually have gone into Salesforce and have looked at the last 2 quarters of deals that they've lost. Then they've come back to sales management and said, hey, for these deals that we lost in this particular vertical, do you think it would have been helpful for us to align with somebody like an AWS or an Azure or GCP in order to try to go and sell more? So there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. And I'm not saying that vertical is the only way, but I think we have to take a cue from the fact that these CSPs have gone vertical in large part. And so, we need to accommodate our way of selling if we want to be as relevant as we can be to theirs.
Yeah, I love that. That kind of goes hand in hand with something that our sellers internally, I hear all the time, and it's all about internal alignment, get your house in order before you start to, go out and expand. What were some of the challenges, or what are some of the ways that you have been able to find, internal alignment to actually get everyone on the same page? Everyone is ready and gung-ho about going to market.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm not sure that everybody's going to ever be 100%, only because the nature of our businesses is that we have attrition. So with new sales reps coming on that may not know what the go-to-market motion is, or perhaps others leaving, I don't know that we'll ever be there 100%, and it's a journey. So, the way that I would describe it is I'd say it's a series of concentric circles. And so at the center, it's what you need to do as an alliance manager to be effective. And so inside of that circle, you put things like programmatic things that not only are key to you being successful, but that you have personal ownership over, not just responsibility, but ownership, right? And so inside of that, I would put all of the things that are going to be core to you getting your job done every day. The program stuff comes to mind. Kind of immediately after that is going to be the ops circle. I probably wouldn't put sales yet, because ops on the outside on that next concentric circle is going to need to understand what a private offer is, and they're going to need to understand what ACE is, and whether you're the person putting into ACE or you're the person working in Microsoft Partner Center. Like, you need to have all that down, because when you get a deal going, well, then that's when all these are going to need to take place, right? When all these transactions are going to take place. And if you start small and you start early, they understand. And more often than not, the ops people are the ones that come up with some great ideas for automation. I'll give you one in a second. But the idea is that once you get kind of your house clean when it comes to your own contracts, et cetera, then you go to your ops people and you say, I'm going to get ahead of this with you now, by telling you what's coming. And so when that happens, when these transactions are going to go down, this is how they work. Enter tackle. So now I introduce our ops team to the tackle team that got us listed. And I said, okay, you guys need to do the mind meld. When we do a couple of transactions, we need you on the phone with us. And I know I can think of at least one transaction, David, that you were on the phone with us. I know you know which one it is, but you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to go it alone. You just have to go it smart. So get your ops team in the boat with you and have them understand the value of this. And then some of the things that I've seen happen after that, as in the meantime, then the third circle is, you're working with your sellers to try to push as much business into ops. I can tell you that one of the cool things that we did is, and you all can do this as well, is by virtue of some of the technology that we have implemented with Tackle, we can get these propensity to buy scores. So imagine a situation where, and I've heard of other companies doing this, so I'll genericize it, but to say, imagine if a company is in Salesforce and a company has put some triggers in place so that when a certain deal gets to a certain size and has a certain score according to Tackle in one of the marketplaces, that it can send you a Slack notification. So automatically you as the alliance person knows, oh, wow, it hit this sales stage, it's this size, and it's got a high. Now, whether you decide to do something or not with it is not the point. The point is now you can begin to build some of this automation with your ops team, or perhaps on your own, in order to kind of get that next level going. But those would be some recommendations that I would have.
Yeah. One kind of final question before we wrap into some of the questions that I'm seeing from the audience here is, in the past, you've talked about Tackle feeling almost like an extension to the team. When you're looking ahead at Island, how do you see the partnership with Tackle growing? How do you see it evolving, Island's cloud strategy and as the business actually scales?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't bet against Dylan. I'll start there. He gives some pretty compelling roadmap, and I'm actually pretty excited to hear the next session with Adam, because I've listened to him present on roadmap as well. But look, at the end of the day, I kind of look at Tackle as the people that we go to when we don't have answers, and it doesn't necessarily only apply to Tackle's remit. Like, we have an issue with fill in the blank. Is that something, you've got resources that work with those hyperscalers. Can you help us? Or I'm really interested in seeing how you've evolved the company, because you started from doing listings, and then you got a lot more involved in prospect, and then you got more heavily involved in co-sell, and then you have co-sell coaches, and now you've got your agentic. Like, you keep evolving your roadmap. And I'm really excited to see what you come out with. I'm not committing that I'm going to use every feature, but I'll be looking at every one of them for sure.
Awesome. I love that. I'm going to go ahead and share one of the questions that actually came up. So from Jeff says, is vertical just the current industry trend? CSPs and partners seem to follow the vertical movement every 10 years or so. What talk track do you recommend for partners focusing on ISVs that focuses on horizontal solutions?
Yeah, Jeff, it's an excellent question. I was talking to one of my really close buddies who I've worked with for, I don't know, 15 years, and he has an equivalent job to the one that I have, and he's on the horizontal side. So the way that he has cracked that code, if you will, is he has spent most of his time trying to drive marketing events with his hyperscaler. And so in the absence of having, a vertical to go after, he goes after the megaphone. And so what that sounds like is, coming to your PDM, if you have one, and finding ways to go and drive a lot of web activity, trying to get the word out. Yeah, the number that I saw him share with me yesterday was, he's showing hundreds of prospects that are coming in to the events. So it's doable. If you want to hit me offline, I'd be happy to get into it a little bit more with you. But at the end of the day, if you can't play the vertical game, then this is where the programmatic side comes in. And, now it's up to you to use the marketing levers at your disposal.
Awesome. Jeff actually also had another question that I'm going to share on here, and it was kind of a continuation of the question. So he says, and are you seeing marketplaces verticalize, or more importantly, are you seeing comp plans verticalize?
Yeah, I mean, it's a natural extension, right? I know that some of the comp plans that I'm familiar with now, but if you're asking Jeff about like alliance people, BD folks like ourselves, what I find is happening more and more is that if you're a vertical person, you're attaching to that vertical, and so the transactions that may take place outside of your vertical at that same software development company, or what others call ISVs, you may not get comped on that because you're being kind of comped very, very specifically on an activity. So yes, I think it's a natural extension to do that. I think the verticals piece is very much in full swing.
Awesome. And final question. They say, Brian Thompson says, you've worked with Tackle.io early on and recently. What is one new or improved Tackle.io tool that helps Island boost process efficiencies?
Brian, it's a great question. And I was talking to our head of ops yesterday about this exact topic. So I think we want to implement some of I'm not sure that we are on the latest version of the Salesforce connector. And I know that that's, pretty tactical. Jacks are better to open if you play poker. But that's going to be the next one that we have. If I have to, so that's purely from a tactical standpoint. Now, if I had to pick on what I would look at next, it would be this agentic capability. The notion that, like, remember when I talked earlier about creating this mini workflow that notifies me with Slack? Like, I would love to see that level of sophistication across our entire pipeline. And if we can get that and probably a boost in propensity to buy scores, those would be the two things I would focus on.
Awesome. I love hearing the side of the Salesforce app. The newest version is so phenomenal, and we're hearing such amazing feedback so far. So excited for you all to pursue that as well.
Yeah,
and it's been phenomenal. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to share your knowledge with us.
Pleasure.
Yeah. I want to say,
go ahead.
What was that?
No, I was going to say, well, if I got to leave with one final comment, I've got two. One is thank you, Tackle, because you are helping to drive the growth, certainly on my side of the business, and we've got a great partnership. And then secondly, if you are still with us, don't miss Adam's presentation coming up, because I spent the better part of, I think, 3 hours with him during an event in San Diego a few weeks ago, and you're in for a treat. The guy is absolute money. So anyway, thanks for having me, David. Thanks to Tackle for all of your work, and happy to answer any questions when we get offline.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We are about to enter the final lap to close out XP. So we are very happy to welcome back our VP of Product, Adam Boyle. And he's basically going to be talking about what's next when it comes to co-building, what's next when it comes to scaling, and what that looks like through the channels and global expansion. So we look forward to seeing you in the next session, and thank you all so much for joining us. See you soon.